Hi everybody, it's Jim with Great Books, Big Ideas. It's Friday, August 1st. Time for another Friday Reads reading update. Wasn't sure I was going to get around to this week. I've been occupying myself with some other creative pursuits, mainly music related and some writing too. But I have been doing a lot of reading, and I thought it would be appropriate to do another reading update. So I finished one book this week, and I've been dipping into a whole lot of other books and making like slow but steady progress. So I'm going to start with the one that I finished, and that is Clea by Durrell, and this is book 4 in the Alexandria Quartet. I have finished the Alexandria Quartet, which has been a long-term goal of mine. I read Justine in college. It was part of a modern British novel class, and I enjoyed it. I liked it better than the professor did. I remember getting into a little debate with him about that. And then I didn't read the other 3 volumes. I acquired this box set many years ago, maybe, I don't know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But in the last several years, I've read all the other volumes, the 3 other ones, Balthazar, Mount Olive, and Clea. These are nice hardcover editions, but there's nothing really fancy about them. There's no illustrations. They're just a text. This may be, let me check the publication date on this, 1960, it looks like. And there somewhere I was reading that Lawrence Durrell did sort of a final pass edit or revision on this set, and I'm not sure if this reflects that or not, but it's the 7th printing, January 1961. But if you want all the books in one set, you can get that way. What is Clea about? Well, Clea is one of the women who's part of the ensemble who's like living in and out of Alexandria. This is a novel that's set in the during World War II. The previous volumes happened before the war, and then some time has passed, and our narrator, Darley, who's kind of like a writer, but he's also mainly kind of like a diplomatic worker. He comes back to Alexandria after being away for something like 6 years, and everyone's sort of a little bit different. They've changed, and some people have died. And Clea is an artist who has been part of the goings on in the previous volumes. And although the book isn't written from her perspective, she is a main focus of the action, and a relationship develops between the narrator Darley and Clea, and it kind of runs its course, I'll put it that way. And then something kind of tragic happens at the end. I won't spoil it, but it doesn't end as badly as you would fear it would end. The book is sort of like written in different chapters, segments, or sections that do something different, like in each one. So the early chapters are more like reflective narration from Darley as he's coming back and he's encountering these other people. And there's also some good scene depiction of the impact that the war is having on Alexandria. Like it gets bombed like on a nightly basis, mainly down by the docks and the harbor. But people are sort of dealing with the shocks and the aftershocks of World War II, when yet their lives are going on. And then some of the middle chapters turn towards, there's 1 or 2 chapters in the middle where the voice shifts, and you're reading the writing of a character named Pursewarden, who was a writer, and he sort of writes about all these characters, and he is no longer among the living. And you get this effect of like Darley is reading this work by Pursewarden, which is in large measure written to him and about him, which is mocking him in some respects, but also giving advice and so forth. It's kind of like a strange thing. And so there's that in there, and then we shift our focus to different characters. Like, so there's a re-encounter with Justine, who was the love interest in one of the love interests in the first novel. She's the namesake of the first novel, and she has changed quite significantly. She and her husband Nassim are effectively under house arrest, and she seems to have aged a lot, and acting kind of strange, and there's a whole lot going on. If you don't, this is not the kind of book, I think, where if you haven't read the other ones, you're not going to make a whole lot of sense of it. They're all peas in a pod. You kind of have to read them all, and the more you begin to put the things together in this long novel. I consider it as like actually one novel with 4 volumes in it, and it was at times I felt like this volume was a little bit overwritten. I think Durrell is susceptible to that, and yet he has such a lovely prose style, very luscious, that I can forgive him some of his sins. There's a disturbing revelation about Pursewarden and his sister, who's blind. And there are letters that he wrote to her, and he is no more, but it's kind of disturbing. I won't get into it too much in case you want to read the book, but yeah, it's sort of like it's a good novel, but of the 4 volumes, I'm not sure it was my favorite, but by the time I got to the end, I was pretty satisfied with it. And, I've read these over the last few years. I reread Justine, and I just read these. It's taken me maybe about 4 or 5 years to do them all. And it would be nice to read them at a faster pace so I could keep more of the details together. But it's quite a good work. I mean, it doesn't have the reputation that it did when it came out. There was a lot of notoriety, highly praised. And now, who the hell talks about Lawrence Durrell anymore except crazy booktubers like me? But anyway, that's the Alexandria Quartet. It bears comparison to Durrell's quintet of books called the Avignon Quintet. I read that before I tackled this again, and I inevitably was comparing the Avignon Quintet to the Alexandria Quartet. And if you really push me on it right now, I think I might prefer the Avignon Quintet over this one. They're very similar, and there's a lot of echoes from one to the other. Ensemble characters, multi-perspectival. The Avignon Quintet, I think, is even more postmodern, and it's sort of experimenting with like fictional narrators, and some stuff's like kind of hard to follow, but it's really entertaining. A lot of common themes, also set during like that World War II span, like before, during, after. And so, yeah, I feel like he was sort of doing it again. And I think most of those Avignon Quintet books were maybe written in the 1970s, I want to say. But they were really good. And I'd like to reread both sets at some point because, I'm a big Durrell fan. Now, that brings me to a decision. So this is a box set, which I like. It's good. But I also have, and I bought this on eBay a year or 2 ago. This is my favorite paperback edition of the Alexandria Quartet, and it's a box set. And I bought this as a box set. And, you can find the Alexandria Quartet in tons of paperback editions, and some of them are like really meh, you know, sort of, or cheesy, or just blah. These I rather like the cover artwork, and these are all in really good condition. I don't think they've been read, so I'll just show these to you, do some show and tell. Here's Justine, right? I like the hand-drawn style. And there's her spine. Book 2 is Balthazar. These are Dutton paperbacks, by the way. Here's Mount Olive. This was an entertaining read. I read this last summer. Even more of a page turner than Clea. Clea was a little bit plotless till you got towards the end of it, in which some very significant things happen. Here's Clea, like the colors on this one. I really like the design of these paperbacks and this box set, which has these illustrations of the mosque and so forth. And I'm faced with the decision. I've got 2 Alexandria quartets. Do I really need this one now that I've read it? I am very tempted, even though these are nice hardcovers, but they're not illustrated. I'm very tempted to part ways with this one and keep this one. So definitely when I reread it, I'm going to go for the paperbacks. But this takes up a lot less shelf space than this. So I think I haven't decided. I'm not going to do it right away. I don't want to regret things. Although these hardcover box sets, I see them from time to time. They're not uncommon. But I think I'm going to keep. This might be the keeper. And yeah, that's the Alexandria Quartet. So Clea was good, but yeah, it was just a little bit like, I wouldn't say I was disappointed with the book, but I don't know really what the Alexandrian Quartet adds up to. I really would have to think about that for a while and see if it really holds water. But it probably does. But I sort of want to go back to the first volumes and read those at some point again. Theme of love is really big in those books. There's a lot of espionage, there's intrigue, there's sort of he really takes you to that Mediterranean and North African world, and it's a really good trip, and I get very absorbed in his writing. So that's Lawrence Durrell. Now, all the rest of these books are books I'm just kind of actively reading. One is, I'm getting back to this chunker, High Minds by Simon Heffer, The Victorians and the Birth of Modern Britain. And I won't say much about this, except I just finished this really, really long set of chapters about the building of the Albert Memorial. And before that, what's known as Albertopolis, all this Prince Albert stuff that he helped to do, the Great Exhibition and the Crystal Palace, and they moved the Crystal Palace from Hyde Park to south of London, and then they built the Royal Albert Hall and all that. So after Albert passed away, they were planning this monument, and this Simon Heffer goes into excruciating detail, unnecessarily excruciating detail about all the debates between the designers and the artists and the Queen, Victoria, and the members of Parliament and the Prime Minister, and back and forth they go, and it's just build the damn memorial already. I'm just sick of this. But I just felt this is the problem sometimes with histories, is they've done all this, historian has done all this research, and he feels compelled to just stuff this all into the cupboard and, just get some perspective on it and tell us what we need to know. I'm much more interested in what this represented, how it was symbolic of the Victorian age, and, et cetera, et cetera. And he does get into that on like the last few pages of this long section. Everything was sort of like off balance for me. And that seems to be a tendency of this Simon Heffer book. And, there's a temptation, I'm this far into it, there's a temptation to not finish it, but there's enough here that's interesting me that I just think I'll wend my way very slowly through it. And someday, when I'm older and even grayer, can you be grayer than this? I'll finish it. I'll be done with it, and then I can give it away. But anyway, that's that. I also came back to this chunker. This is a little library find. Well, I also used to have this volume, then I gave it away, and I'm not sure if this is the volume I gave away, and it cropped back up locally. Harold Brodkey's Stories in an Almost Classical Mode. It's like his collected stories, I think. He has a tendency to write very long stories. If you are a fan of like New Yorker fiction, he published a lot in the New Yorker, you would like these stories. He reminds me a little bit of John Updike, but he's got his own flavor. There's something more like maybe melancholic about his attitude. He's just as obsessed with sex as Updike is, so there's a lot of that in many of these stories. I feel like some of his stories do go on a little too long, but he's a talented writer, but like I can't really give him like a strong recommendation at this point, but he definitely has some value. So we'll do a fuller report when I manage to finish that. I also, just some other scattered things. This one's been like way on the back burner. I talked about this book a year ago. I haven't even gotten much farther in it, but I did read a couple more sections in it. The World as Will and Idea by Arthur Schopenhauer. This was a recent acquisition, the Penguin Book of Hebrew Verse. This is really scholarly, so it's got this long introduction, which I just skipped over most of it. I just started reading some of the prose translation of these poems, and these early ones are from the Bible. And so not much to say about this yet, but it's certainly a good scholarly achievement. If you really want to deep dive into Hebrew verse, this is cool, and it has the Hebrew along with the translations. So, I just dipped into that. I am starting to prepare for my next Great Books series, the reading program, Plutarch, his lives of Alexander and Caesar. So I started rereading the Alexander life, and that's really good so far. And then a couple more brand new pickups. Well, I've had these books for ages, but I just picked them up to read them. This one I'm actually reading almost halfway through it. It's a short novel by Annie Dillard called The Maytrees, or The Maytrees. And here's Annie Dillard. I guess I was thinking of her because when I read Desert Solitaire by Edward Abbey, I was comparing him to Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. This is a novel about a couple who live on Cape Cod, and it's set in mid-century, 20th century America. And the setting was very captivating, the Cape Cod setting. It's not a place I've visited, but, I'm used to the shore, the East Coast, so it conjures up visions of that. And she has an interesting writing style, which I'll talk more about this when I finish it, which won't be too long from now. It's a very clipped, concise, kind of gappy type of style, but it's it's kind of cool, but it's also very mannered. So I'm not exactly sure how I feel about it. I started reading this one book by Richard Yates, The Easter Parade. So there's a couple of booktubers mentioned Richard Yates. One is Carl. I forget the name of his channel, but a lot of you probably know Carl. He recommended, I think it was 11 Kinds of Loneliness, a book of short stories by Yates, which is incredible. I really recommend that book. And I read that book and it fell apart on me. The spine just kind of cracked wide open. I taught that book once, and then I've since then found a fresh paperback copy of it and plan to reread it someday. But I really want to get into his novels. I have not yet read Revolutionary Road, which would be his most famous book. And that was turned into a movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. Seen the movie and I liked it. But this, another booktuber, and I will shout her out when I do a fuller review of this. She did a really great review of this and got me very, very interested in it, in reading it. So just started it, but I'm liking it so far. I really like Richard Yates' style. He's kind of a sad writer, sad situations, as Elton John would put it. But, you know, I'm not averse to melancholy. This is 1 month since my dog died, Alfie, and, you know, I'm missing him a lot. And it's just, you know, there's nothing wrong with feeling sad. You know, it's a feeling. It's better to feel than to not feel. Now, the last book I want to talk about is, this was a reviewer recommendation on the heels of my Proust reading project. And this is Chasing Lost Time, The Life of ck. Scott Moncrief, Soldier, Spy, and Translator by Jean Findlay. I am very actively reading this, enjoying it a bit. I'm getting close to the halfway mark. And I'm learning a lot about ck. Scott Moncrief, who I knew nothing about other than he wrote one of the most famous English translations of a foreign work. And whew, wow. So he's from Scotland, and he was very scholarly, although he didn't test into Oxford, which was sort of a major disappointment, but he went to, a lot of good schools. Got in with like sort of the literary crowd. He was also a homosexual and kind of got into like the sort of circle that was tangentially part of like the Oscar Wilde world. Oscar was gone by this point, but that sort of London literary homosexual scene, he's part of that, and he basically kept his homosexuality under wraps so very few people knew about it. He was also a poet. He published a lot of verse, and I've just been reading the sections where he was in World War I, and he was, was an officer and was very well liked by his battalion, and he was in and out of the war. He kept getting like sick with like trench foot and trench flu, and so he would see action, and then he would like, go rest for a while, and then at one point, he a shell blew up and he broke his leg in many places, like severely injured. It took him a long time to recuperate from that. So and now he's just beginning to sort of get into like translation. He starts translating the Song of Roland, the French poem or epic romance. And he hasn't gotten into Proust yet, so I'm really waiting to see what happens with that, but that'll come shortly. But yeah, it's just kind of cool to read about this life of a guy. He also knew a lot of the British war poets. And it makes me want to read my Penguin Classics anthology of British war poetry, World War I poetry, which I recently got. So that'll be coming up soon. But yeah, really enjoying this biography. It's got like a nice level of detail, but it's not like overwhelming. Jean Findlay is a grandniece of ck. Scott Moncrief, so there's that family tie-in. But yeah, it's pretty cool book so far. So that's ck. Scott Moncrief. Yeah, there are other books I'm dipping into, but that is enough for now. I think I just have waxed on, not very poetically, but yeah, so that is my Friday reads for August 1st, 2025. We have finally had a break in the weather. It finally got a little cooler, and it's a major relief to be able to sort of go outside and not just be miserable. But that's all for now. Now it's your turn. Tell us, if you're watching this in semi-real time, what have you been reading this week? What have you finished? What do you want to read? What did you not finish? You have questions, comments about these books, these writers, let me know. It's all good. It's great to hear from you all. I hope everyone's doing well. We'll see you again soon. Bye.